Hello, good morning, and welcome to Newsfile. And what a news week it has been indeed. There is only one place to start, the debate around the anti-gay bill before Parliament. This week, the landscape shifted when some of Ghana's finest academic and legal brains emerged with a formidable pushback against the bill. That seemed to have re-energized the pro-bill lobbyists, including some of Ghana's most powerful religious groups, both Christian and Muslim, united in support of the bill. There has been Holy Ghost-filled threats of voting out politicians who either are neutral or object to the bill. The academics have also fought back, insisting the Christians and the Muslim community cannot force the state to adapt their sectarian religious beliefs into law. The battle lines are now drawn, and this morning, both sides will be here as we interrogate the issues. Then later, what on earth is happening at the Tema oil refinery? More than 100,000 liters of gas oil vanish into thin air, $4.8 million of LPG gone. And the most shocking of all, 18 drums of electrical cables worth more than 10 million cedis gone with the wind. And you think you have heard enough? Well, wait till you learn later on Newsfile this morning that it is all just a tiny tip of a gargantuan iceberg. My name is Evans Mensah. Something is away. Welcome. I am back after the break with my guests.
Hello, I'm Dori Nando. You can catch up with all the fun on the Cosmopolitan Mix and on all our shows via podcast. Just go to My Joy Online podcast and search for your favorite show and relive those moments all over again. Only on Joy 99.7 FM, radio for discerning listeners.
Super Hits Radio, Joy 99.7.
And thanks for staying with us here on Newsfile. And indeed, Newsfile, as you know, is always brought to you by Bank of Africa, as strong as a group, as close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go, at Shasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert and Sons, seeing is indeed believing. We lead home is where one starts from. Star Assurance, your solid partner. MG Auto Trading, official distributors of MG vehicles in Ghana. CBG, we stand with you. Fabric Metal, your partner in steel and Rehoboth Properties. They make this possible. My guests are joining me now on the show, and we have a great list representing all sides of the debate indeed. And we are starting obviously with the LGBTQ plus debate, which of course we've seen re-emerge, re-energized this week. Joining me is, of course, a leading voice amongst the members of Parliament advocating for the bill. They sponsored it, Nigo Prampram MP, Samuel George. Also joining me is Sylvester Tete, is the MP for Botiano English and Manfro, Board Chair, Ghana Enterprises Agency, and Vice Chair, Communications Committee of Parliament. We also have joining us Professor Audrey Gajepo, Dean, School of Information Communication Studies of the University of Ghana. Professor Pierre Tian, he's the School of Law of the School of Law, University of Ghana. Professor Charles Godfred Aka, Associate Professor of Economics, Institute of Statistical Social Economic Research, and former Director, Center for Social Policy Studies, University of Ghana. Legon also joining us. But my favorite guests are yourselves, wherever you are this morning around the world, watching, listening. Don't forget to join us on our many social media platforms. It's on Facebook, it's on Twitter, anywhere. In fact, that you can find Joy 99.7 or Joy News. Just look for us on the social media and just simply exchange your thoughts with us on this. Again, we are live on Joy 99.7 FM. I mean, for those of you who may have missed the fireworks this week on this subject, I have something to refresh your memories. Watch.
An impermissible invasion of the inviolability and human dignity of the person, of freedom of expression and thought, conscience and belief, including academic freedom, of freedom of assembly, including the right to organize and take part in processions and demonstrations, of the right to protection against discrimination, on the grounds of gender, race, ethnic origin, religion, creed, or social or economic status. These rights are at the very heart of our constitutional architecture. It is indisputable that without these rights, Ghana's democracy would be meaningless. It is accordingly our respectful view that any law that seeks to restrict and repress these rights in specific instances must meet the very high standard of necessity and reasonableness.
The Church of Pentecost is 10.38% of the Ghanaian population. And we are against this LGBTQ plus. And the plus is never going to end. Our concern is not about today, it's about the future. Today, when we elect in this LGBTQ plus, what is going to happen is that we are going to accept same-sex marriage, which the president says that it is never going to happen at his watch. But if he allows LGBT plus to start, it is true that it is never going to happen at his watch. By the time we get into same-sex marriage, the president will not be the president of the nation. I agree with him, but he should stop this. He should close the door at where it matters. And we are saying that he should close it now. This movement is an insult to the intelligence of God, the Creator. We are just trying to tell God that you didn't think enough. This is how it should have been. And if you have a society where there are no absolutes, soon there will be no law.
That's right.
And we have to be very careful. And our lawyers who are arguing for all this, the matter on the floor is not about rights, it's about morality.
This bill, yes, it stands in the name of myself and 7 of my colleagues, 8 members of Parliament, but we worked on this bill in conjunction with the National Coalition on the protection of Ghanaian cultural values. And this coalition is made up of the National House of Chiefs. It's made up of the Christian organizations, the Muslim organizations, traditionalists. And so we are in a solid place. We are not swayed. I mean, I always make reference to a July 1st, 2021 report, Dispatch 461 by CDD. And interestingly, the much talked about memo that has raised this issue again has 2 of the fellows from CDD as signatories to it. That dispatch shows that Ghanaians of the bill, but this is part of the parliamentary process, and for us we are welcome to any memos, either in support or against. Like the deputy clerk stated today, we will go through the processes of evaluation, and there will be a full stakeholder meeting where everybody who has every shade of opinion is welcome to bring it for us to shape the final bill.
This is not just anti. We have put out there a holistic treatment for gay people who are already involved in gay. To treat them, because some of them are actually experiencing hormonal imbalances.
Okay.
And that is pushing them there. We have a number of specialist doctors who are giving up their services. And we don't want to call names.
Okay.
Because there may be some who are willing to be treated of this issue of being gay or lesbian. It can be treated.
I see.
It is not just a way of life.
I see.
And we don't want to publish locations
of these hospitals and who is being treated.
Who is, because some may want to go there. And we want to respect the confidentiality of the gay members and lesbian members, so that anytime they decide, they should know that we are committed to treating them and making them normal human beings.
Now, obstetricians or gynecologists and pediatricians are not allowed, when you are born, to write on your card that you are male or female in some countries. They say you must wait for that child to become of age to tell you that I'm male or I'm female. What kind of nonsense? and there's child sex abuse. The research also shows that most of them experience sex abuse, and that's what has made them who they are in childhood, and then they repeat same.
The LGBTQIAA P+ activities are lifestyle choices and personal practices which cannot be equated with or accorded the status of rights. This is especially so because scientific research indicates that no one is born hardwired with these practices or with these attitudes genetically ingrained. Quran chapter 6 verse 116, I quote, indicates that, and if you obey most of those upon the earth, they will mislead you from the way of Allah. They follow not except assumption, and they are not but falsifying. In this context, therefore, we fully endorse the Proper Human Sexual Rights and Ghanaian Family Values Bill of 2021, which is currently before Parliament, and encourage the Parliament of Ghana and the President to swiftly pass the bill and assent to it respectively.
We shouldn't encourage that. We should not be talking about that. We should stop it. We should stop that.
No, but your own very good friend, Kintampo, is leading the charge.
That doesn't mean that he's not my friend, but I'm saying that Kintampo, I disagree entirely with you. He's my friend, yes. I disagree entirely. I will not support this argument. Gazipo, Madam, I admire you. Your writings, please. I will not support it. Drop it.
They should drop it?
They should drop it. Of course, they are entitled to their views. How? You are encouraging this. How do we even discuss this even in the public domain? Please, my good brothers and sisters, it has got nothing to do with religion. It has got nothing to do with politics. It has got something to do with due respect, with all humility. It has got something to do with common sense and respect for somebody's culture, some people's culture, the society.
I see, but what's the position of the MPP on this matter, sir?
I can't speak for the MPP and I don't speak for the MPP.
You're the Deputy General Secretary of the party.
Yes, this is not a matter for the MPP. This is a matter for every Ghanaian, every reasonable person, every questionable person.
So this is just an illustration of how heated it's become in the last week. And I'm delighted that all my guests are now seated or joining us via Zoom. As I just indicated, we have with me Sam George, is the MP for Nigo Prom, represents his constituency, and of course he's has become almost like the leading voice among the proponents of the bill, the sponsors of the bill. Sylvester Tete is MP for Botiano English and Manfro, is the board chair and Ghana of the Ghana Enterprise Agency and vice chair Communications Committee of Parliament. He joins me in the studio. Joining me via Zoom this morning is Adam Senanu, who's a governing council member of the National Coalition for Proper Human Sexual Rights and Family Values and President Advocates for Christ Ghana. Professor Audrey Gajepo is a Dean, School of Information and Communication Studies, University of Ghana. Professor Piaget Tian, School of Law, University of Ghana. We'll also be joined by Professor Charles Aka, Professor Charles Godfrey Aka, who is Associate Professor of Economics, Institute for Statistical, Social and Economic Research, and former Director of the Center for Social Policy Studies, University of Ghana. I want to start with the very latest on this, because this unfolded just yesterday. A story emerged in Nkranza, in Bono East region, where a man, and then we've seen the videos also, right? A man was caught in the room. And if you watch the videos and the narration, the reporters confirmed this. He was trailed by some individuals. A person, and this person is gay, self-confessed, and had attempted to, well, the person who accused him says he was harassing him. And so he lured him into a room. He was about to engage in the act, and he was pounced upon. The video shows that they assaulted him somewhat. They took him to the chief's palace. They poured schnapp on his head. He was banished subsequently. And we've seen this play out yesterday. We just watched all over. It's a major thing for a lot of people, as Ghana has been placed right in the midst of the international focus of attention here. And I want to start this conversation with Dr. Regajipo. Doc, thanks for joining us. I'm pretty sure you've seen the videos and possibly read a story of this man in Nkranza.
I've just heard of the video. I haven't seen the video.
Okay.
I've read the story, but I haven't seen the video.
Okay.
Responding to all of you here.
Is this story in any way an amplification of the warnings that you've been giving this week about this bill?
Yes, and I didn't expect it to start so soon, you see, because some of the people who are supporting the bill, and in fact the bill itself talks about protecting LGBTQ persons against behavior like that, against lynching. Am I correct? However, the difficulty, and that's what we're trying to point out, when you frame people and you dehumanize them because of their difference, you encourage a certain kind of atmosphere that makes it easy for things like that to happen. The people who attacked the supposed gay person are doing something against the law, because we know that you cannot take the law into your own hands. People have prejudices, people have biases, and we know that. And that's why it's a bit difficult to have a law that infringes on people's human rights like we have set out in our memorandum, and at the same time say, but don't do anything to these people. Even the police, who are supposed to deal with this issue, have their prejudices and biases, and nobody is saying that they shouldn't. We all have our prejudices and our biases, but we also live under a constitutional democracy. We also live in a country of laws, and the law does not allow you to take to attack people because of their sexual difference or because they are engaging in a practice you don't want. Now, if that man was molesting an underage child or even molesting somebody without the person's consent, of course, there are provisions in the law to take care of that. If a heterosexual person molests somebody, or if a heterosexual person attempts to have sex with an underage, there are provisions in the law to deal with that. So you see, these are the dangers we're talking about. We're being vilified all over the place as though we don't have a right to submit memorandum to Parliament pointing out the dangers of the bill. Please allow us to have a civilized debate, to educate people not only about the practices, but also about the implications of how we want to deal with it. So for us, our problem is the implications of how you want to deal with something you disagree with. So the churches disagree with homosexual behavior, the mosque, Islam disagrees with homosexual behavior. That's fine. Individuals in Ghana disagree with homosexual behavior. That's fine. It's their prerogative to disagree with it. But how do we then deal with it? And we are arguing that dealing with it in this manner raises more questions for us than solves a situation.
Adam Senanu, what do you say to that? I mean, following from this incident yesterday, that is an illustration of the problem with this particular bill. It only emboldens people who will believe that they have the right to do what they did to this man yesterday. Is a reason why we need to step back from this aggressive push towards decriminalizing, an act and outlawing it. What do you say to those who will use this as an example to make a case why we should step back from pushing through this bill?
Thank you very much, Evans. And I'm going to put you on the hot seat for a while. I find it intriguing that you said that it was somebody who lured. It's more like the one who wanted to beat up this gay person was the one who lured the gay person into a room. But that's not the narrative. You've turned it upside down. Actually, what happened was this was a gentleman who'd been trying to entice this young man to see him in a hotel room. And so it's the other way around. And if anything, this is a very good illustration of why this bill is so important. And so let me put it this way. In the bill, we're very, very particular about ensuring that the rights of such persons are upheld. We want them respected, we want them promoted, we want them fulfilled under our law. And my position is that in this bill, no human rights that is accorded to any of these individuals has been breached. Indeed, they still have their rights to association, to transport, to speak. There's only one thing we are saying, and that is because we already have that in our law, Section 104 of the Criminal Code 1960, relating to the same-sex matter, that in respect of the practice of homosexuality, you don't have a right to do that or to engage around that. So I see this as a good illustration why the bill is important. It's a good illustration why I must do a lot of education on the aspect that says that you don't have the right to harm, to speak against, to insult, or to attempt to do anything to any such person in this community. If you see anything you're unhappy with, you are to report to an officer of the law. And I think that we should look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, so that is, I want to also bring it, because I want everybody to chip in quickly on this. And so we could have a bite at this, because this is a classic illustration of, I guess, both sides of the argument. As you've seen there, Professor Odegaard will argue using the same incident and then Senanu. But I want to bring in the lawyer who's of course also joining us. Professor Apiejucha, are you with me? Hello, Prof. Prof, kindly unmute yourself so I can hear you.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I mean, so here you have this incident. What's your own reaction to this incident in Nkranza as it relates to? You just heard Adam Senanu there mention the criminal code, which talks about unnatural carnal knowledge, and that if you catch somebody in the act, as was alleged yesterday, report him to the police. Of course, we know that what they did yesterday was instead taken to the chief's palace. What's your own reading and reaction to this?
Thank you. I think in the first place, let me react to Mr. Senanu's view that the bill as it is doesn't target the rights issues relating to freedom of association, freedom of expression, and so on. I think that is not the case. If you look at the bill carefully, it targets those aspects of rights. It of course, the interest of the pro-morality view, as I put it, is the fact that they want to see that this particular right, this particular practice of the sexual expression is outlawed.
We may have lost him there on the line. Let me come to the studio whilst we get that fixed. Sam, your reaction to that incident yesterday?
Very good morning to you and our viewers and my co-panelist. I believe that the incidents that happened yesterday are justification why this bill must be passed with expediency and with alacrity. Reason being that if you read clause 22 of the bill, it says prohibition of extrajudicial treatment. And let me read so that this would settle this matter. 22.1. And I say I want to read the bill because many people are commenting on the bill, including many people in academia, without having read the bill or having read the bill with understanding. 22.1 says, a person commits a misdemeanor if the person, whether verbally or physically abuses, assaults or harasses a person, A, accused of an offense under this act. The offenses under this act are spelled out in 6.1, which have to do with the various shades of homosexuality. B, suffering from any gender or sexual identity challenge, including LGBTQIAAP+, or any other variant of a sexual identity challenge. 22.2 says, a person who commits a misdemeanor under section 1, subsection 1, is liable to a fine of not less than 500 penalty units and not more than 1,000 penalty units, or to a term of imprisonment of not less than 6 months and not more than 3 years. This means that if this bill was law, the persons who malhandled the individual alleged to have been involved in homosexuality would have had questions to answer under this law.
So he could be prosecuted.
They could face up to 6 months, between 6 months to 3 years. Today, maybe the best you can do is ask the police to charge the person with assault or battery. But this bill provides proper justification for why we must end extrajudicial treatment. Because you see, the lawyers and academics would want to talk about rights and rights, and we'll come to that discussion.
Yes, definitely.
Because I heard the lawyer who was just on the line say that the bill attacks fundamental rights. I would want you to put a pointed question to him to state what rights, what fundamental rights. They've gone on and on about
we'll
rights.
Come to that.
What fundamental right? And he should reference the Constitution for us. What part of the 1992 Constitution is this bill attacking? This bill supports the 1992 Constitution because the 1992 Constitution provides for a fair trial for every accused person before a competent court of jurisdiction. So anybody who engages in extrajudicial treatment is liable to face punishment. Again, you see, and I agree with Adam when he's worried about the way you situated that the person was lured. I don't have a problem with them taking the individual to the chief's palace.
You don't have a problem?
No.
But you saw what happened. They poured snap on his head.
If you let me land, don't cut me midstream, please, so that you get the government of what I'm saying. I don't have a problem with them taking the person to the chief's palace. But again, this bill has anticipated such instances.
Okay.
That when such instances happen, that is where Section 5 or Clause 5 of the bill comes in. A duty to report. This is what it says. A person in whose presence, and this will answer those who say, how come if you pass this bill, people are going to be chasing people and just arresting them? They haven't read the bill. The bill says, a person in whose presence an offense is committed under this act shall report the commission of the offense. Shall report the commission of the offense, not the person. Shall report the commission of the offense to a police officer, or in the absence of a police officer, to a political leader, opinion leader, or the customary authorities of the community in which the offense is committed. That's why I said I have no problem with reporting to the chief. However, when that is done, 5.2 says, a leader or authority to whom a report is made under subsection 1 shall, A, within 7 days of the report, ensure that the report is lodged at the nearest police station, and B, assist the police in the investigation and prosecution of the matter. So what you should see is this individual who's, and that's why I agree again with Adam, we need to do a lot of public sensitization. He's been hitting on somebody in a homosexual manner. He reports to the lawful authority. The chief is supposed to, within 7 days, report it to the police, for the police to then arrest the person and begin investigation into the matter. That's why I said it is right that you go and report to the chief. However, the activities that went on are found on by this. So you need to read at clause 5, clause 22 and understand what the bill is saying. But if you don't, then you run around with all the misinterpretations and misrepresentations that we see. But this is what the law is.
Okay, Sylvester?
Yeah, Evans, thank you very much.
Have you seen the videos though?
Yeah, I've seen the videos. And I think it's quite unfortunate. Let me say a very good morning to our viewers and those listening to us. And then my brother, Sam George. I think that it's a straightforward thing. And I'm happy that we are reading the bill on live for people to really understand what this entails. What I will say is that in matters of this nature, we must do away with emotions and deal with the issues. I think yesterday what I saw, in fact this morning I watched the tape again, and then on your sister station, Adom FM had to call the chief. And the chief said they issued a stern warning to them that nobody should attempt to physically assault the gentleman. And I think it's quite refreshing that no matter what the offense is, one must be careful, tolerant, and ensure that due process is followed. Look, these LGBT thing, and the plus keeps on increasing. We don't know when and where it's going to end us. I'm happy, and I believe the president, and I know who the president is. these things should not be seen as these people pushing for it and against us. We must give room for proper education, for proper understanding. Yes, the right of every human being. Today, it is criminalized for incest in this country. So are you saying tomorrow somebody wakes up to say that we are two consenting adults and I can date my brother or my father, give me opportunity to marry because that is my orientation and I feel attracted to him or her? I think it's quite unfortunate. And we have come this far because we represent the good people of this country. And if you look at Article 39 of our Constitution, I want to say that, look, the vast majority of the Ghanaian population is worried about how the moral fiber of our society is being attacked today. And I can't get it. Why the West is so much interested in pushing us to stop this. It's a sovereign state. And I had a lot of conversations with chiefs, opinion leaders in my constituency, elsewhere. Evans, this is a sovereign state, Ghana. I think that the bipartisan nature of this bill in Parliament, we must also be tolerant to the other dissenting views, wherever it's coming from and what the position is. We will take all these things into consideration. As for the bill, I pretty much believe if you ask members of Parliament, about 90% or more, or unanimously, would love to vote for it. People are bringing issues to the extent that somebody is talking about human rights issues in this bill, and I think it's been answered perfectly. We must.
So for you, 90% of your colleagues are in favor?
I mean, it's unanimous.
Unanimous.
It's unanimous. Everybody, it's unanimous. To the extent that, what are we fighting about? Every society thrives on its moral values. And if it's been attacked, I'm not too sure that people in our society, I mean Ghanaians for that matter, go to the street. Nobody, today we've gone to the extent that a thief is arrested and then people go to his rescue. What they say, that take the person to the police station. And we believe that there are rules and regulations that can deal with that. Morals is important because if a society don't have a morality at its high level, what it means is that everything, we become susceptible to everything that people want to push on us. And I think that we shouldn't be bantering these back and forth. People have a right. And CDD, I'm happy that those fellows from CDD and other respectable people in our society pushing that we should scrap this bill in Parliament. Their own research should tell them what it means. If I go to my constituency, I don't need to ask people. It is a no. But it's not just no, then we leave it there. We must educate them that, look, the fact that you disagree or laws are put in place, you don't take the law into your hands to attack people.
Exactly.
No. The right of these people will be protected, will be respected. But what we are saying, we're getting to a stage where people are forcefully going to the extent of open advertisements and pushing it on ourselves, even to the extent that they are adding conditions to resource.
Yeah, well, in fact, we'll come to that. So
that's the economic, the sectional, where the vast majority of our people are in agreement that we must legislate to ensure that the moral standard of our society is protected.
Okay, so stay with me. Let's get to the specifics because there's so much to get through. I want to bring in Professor Chair again. We lost him briefly there. Prof, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great,
yes,
fantastic. Okay, so let's start with the issue of right, because I've read your memo to Parliament, the memo that was submitted by the group from the academics, Professor Odrigajepo and others were signatories to that. The fundamental argument there was about how this bill, as you suggest, violates almost all the rights guaranteed under the Constitution of this Republic. Now, reading the bill itself, Sam George points out that, and we started with this incident yesterday, that in this bill actually guarantees protection against assault and harm rights of these individuals, prohibits, for example, Clause 22 prohibits extrajudicial treatment. Clauses in the bill actually gives the people involved in LGBTQ activities rights to get medical attention, etc. So balance that for me with your argument that this bill is a violation of rights and dehumanizes people.
Thank you. When you are talking about human rights, these are rights that, excuse me, that people are entitled to as a result of their humanity. Now, rights issues can also be seen in the context of the fact that you cannot have an omnibus form of rights that every country and every people should subscribe to. So that is why, for example, we have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights to Africans and the Europeans and so on. Now, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Good, okay. So coming down to the bill as we have it, you are looking at certain rights, such as the right to form association, the right to express yourself with regard to what you intend to do with that association, the right to be able to use that particular right you have to attain certain form of development for yourself. Here we have a situation where if this bill is enacted, it's going to prescribe the freedom of people to talk about this issue of homosexuality. And I think that is trampling down on freedom of expression. And if that is done, it has serious consequences on the people's freedoms.
And Prof, one of the things I want us to do is to drill down to specifics. So whilst you mention a right that you believe it violates, if you can specify for me in the bill, and so we could, because I want us to be very factual. So if you can narrow down for me. So you mentioned right to violation of right to expression and right to freedom to associate. Which aspects of the bill violates these rights for you?
Sorry, the line froze, so I didn't get your...
No, I was just asking. You mentioned right to, the bill violates the right to freedom of expression and the right to association. I'm asking to specify for me which aspects of the bill specifically violates these two rights you've mentioned, and subsequently all the rights that you've articulated, which also specify for me the areas in the bill so that we can be more specific and drill down to the issues.
Well, the bill, for example, says that you cannot question certain practices, or you cannot question, when you question the law as it is, and when you discuss homosexuality issues, then...
Oh, goodness. I think we may have lost him there. Unfortunately, his line is not holding up. Because we've lost him, we'll try and see if we can get him on a better connection. Sorry? Yes. Prof, okay, you're back. Please, I lost you for a few seconds. Just trace back again. You're mentioning the specific aspects of the bill.
Yes, so I'm saying that the bill, for example, says that you cannot question the issue of homosexuality. You cannot express it on the radio, in social media, and so on. That is a violation of academic right to freedom of expression. And it also talks about the fact that if, as a lecturer, I want to talk about LGBTQ rights in my human rights class, I cannot talk about it because I'll be questioning the fundamentals of this particular practice, which the law seems to prohibit. But one thing that is also clear, which the law does not talk about at all, is the fact that it doesn't talk about discrimination meted out to people if they are found to be gay and lesbian people. So if, for example, I have a right to work, I go for an interview, and the interview says I qualify, but then if I'm found out that I'm an LGBTQ.
We may have lost him again. What I'm going to do is, at least he's put forth his argument to back the position in the memoranda they submitted to Parliament that it violates freedom of expression. Some judge, you are a sponsor of the bill.
It's interesting, and I'm hoping that this will be one of the last times that we would have to do this. Explain to our friends in academia, in the intelligentsia, what this bill says, and that they should read it respectfully. I plead with them to read it and understand it. He makes reference to the African Charter of Human and People's Rights. Well, let me just go back a bit. We have the EU Charter on Human Rights. We have the United Nations Charter on Human Rights. But the African Charter is not an African Charter on Human Rights. It's an African Charter on Human and People's Rights. You know why? Because the African context is different from Europe and the rest of the world. The African context is a communal context. So the rights are bestowed on you as a human being within the context of the people. That's why it's called the Human and People's Charter Rights. They need to understand this thing. So when you're quoting that charter, now let's go to that charter and let's see what that charter says. In Article 18(1) and 2 of the charter he's quoted, this is what it says. The family shall be the natural unit and basis of society. It shall be protected by the state, which shall take care of its physical health and morals. The African Charter that Prof is quoted. 18(2) says, the state shall have the duty to assist the family, which is the custodian of morals and traditional values recognized by the community. Traditional values recognized by the community. What does the Ghanaian community recognize as our traditional values? Is this bill in consonance with that? Well, Professor Odrigajopo's CDD carried out a research, Dispatch 461, on the 1st of July, published on the 1st of July this year. It says that 93% of Ghanaians frown on homosexuality. So what is recognized by the Ghanaian community? Is it in consonance with this law? Yes, it is. He talks about rights and says that this bill infringes on rights. Rights to association, rights to expression.
Yeah.
Look, again, a huge misconception. What the bill criminalizes, when you go to I think section 11 or so, 11, 12, 13 of the bill, where it criminalizes 12 and 13, yeah. Talking about prohibition of the propaganda of promotion of and advocacy for activities prohibited under this act. Mm-hmm. How is a conversation for public education on the ills or challenges of LGBTQAAP+ promotion of it? How is it propaganda of it? How is it advocacy of it? You see, and he makes an example of academic freedoms and that he cannot teach in his class. If you are teaching in your class, your human rights law class, and you are teaching about the challenges of LGBTQ and all, and not trying to inculcate the doctrines of LGBTQ into your students, you have nothing to fear. But if you turn yourself into an advocate for LGBTQ rights in your class and advocate that the Ghanaian child who you have been asked to teach in consonance, in trust, that child has been placed in your care in trust. You have to teach that child in consonance with our customary values. And you go and you are trying to inculcate something contrary, you fall foul of the law. But if you are having an intellectual discussion or a lecture on what the history of LGBTQ has been, how it has evolved, the challenges it's facing even on the African continent, how it has been embraced elsewhere, and it is solely for educational purposes, you have no problem. It is the same way. I always do this. I say, look, prostitution, and I use armed robbery, and the intelligentsia and academia have said, don't use armed robbery. Armed robbery is not consensual. Okay, fine. Prostitution is consensual. Prostitution is an individual selling his or her body for sex, for monetary value. It is the person gives you consent to have sex with them and pay them. So it's consensual. Why do you not come and sit here and run LPMs for prostitutes? Why don't we have an association of prostitutes in Ghana? Are they also not human beings? Don't they have human rights? But it's simply because it is not in consonance with what the larger society has agreed. And let people bear in mind, Law. We have lawyers on the line. Law, the basic definition for law is that law is a set of rules agreed upon by a certain group of people to govern their operations. So law is what a particular society have agreed on. So when people want to quote bills and talk about discrimination, why would you call it discrimination? Homosexuality is deemed illegal in Ghana, and natural canal knowledge is deemed illegal in Ghana. And when this bill comes into force, all its shades will be deemed illegal. Now, if you are an employer and somebody appears before you and you find out that that person is an armed robber, or you find out that that person is into money fraud or cyber fraud, would you employ the person?
Hold your horses. Let me bring in Professor Gajabo. Prof, what's your reaction to the rights question?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just say something. He mentioned the fact that the law on a natural canal knowledge exists. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I'm sure that the MP knows that that law on a natural canal knowledge is not crafted only for sexual relations between same-sex persons, and that if you were heterosexual, including him, if he engaged in an act of unnatural carnal knowledge, he also has fallen afoul of the law. So the problem with infringing that law is not only same-sex persons. He understands, and I know that he knows, that the law includes in a natural carnal knowledge things that perhaps heterosexuals, even in the privacy of their bedroom, may do. And those are some of the problems. So, for example, and excuse the sensitivities and I hope of viewers and listeners, if you engage in oral sex in a blowjob, it is a natural carnal knowledge, okay, according to the law as it stands now. It's not permitted. It is not only homosexual sexuals. So I want to put that on the table. But let me come back to the issue on rights. The MP picked on Mr. Apkejecho, and I'm sure he's a lawyer. I hope you give him a chance to come back on this issue. But what is his interpretation? What is his definition of promotion? So he talks about if we teach in our classrooms and we confine ourselves to telling people about the history of homosexuality, etc., it will not be promotion. I'm gratified to hear that. But what if I tell students that because I disagree with him, because we have a strong charter on human rights, both constitutionally in Ghana, also on the continental level and on the international level, and if I tell students that because we're signatories to all of those conventions, I have a problem with criminalizing homosexuality, and that I think that people who have different sexual preferences deserve to be respected and not criminalized. Would I have the right to say that? And wouldn't it be interpreted as promoting? Because we are defending their rights. And you know, the provision talks about even people who advocate for people with LGBTQI people. And we're saying that we have a constitution that anticipates, actually, that sometimes it is true that the majority of people in the country do not like certain things. But it has to be put to the test. How does that behavior harm the country? How does it harm the country? And we are saying, and I'm glad that he and other people are now coming to the important for others to come to bear on this so that we can have a good debate, a debate that educates people about rights in this country, because I'm beginning to think that people don't have as clear an understanding of rights as we thought they would. So you do have in all communities minorities who the larger community don't like. That's why we have those provisions. It's not to make sure that if you don't like the person, you still can't infringe on their rights.
But Prof, doesn't...
Let me learn for 1 minute. I am saying...
But Prof, I mean, I'm asking this because of what you just said there. Doesn't this bill protect, and he just read that in 22 of the bill, protect the rights of these minority individuals within the gay and lesbian community from assault, from being abused, from denying them health care? It's all written in this bill.
But the larger point of the bill says if you identify yourself as LGBTQI, you run afoul of the bill. Never mind whether you ever engage in a natural canal knowledge. Never mind that, okay? Because the fact that we are heterosexual doesn't necessarily automatically translate to us having sex, okay? So the fact that they identify as LGBTQI doesn't automatically translate into any behaviors that are anti-sexual. And that's why the premise of the bill, we think is quite dangerous, okay? Now, we do know, and I'm sure that the MPs know, that people are born intersex, whether they like it or not. That's how God created them. And the bill, as you know, also references intersex people. Now, if I'm intersex, and we know that the practice of intersex, and there's a lot of medical argument against that, is determined at birth. And they decide that, okay, you are going to be a woman, you have 2 organs, but woman. And I later on decide that, actually, I feel more like a man. What should I do? And you're saying that they cannot own up to how God actually put them on this earth for. And we're saying that, you see, you don't have to like culturally a behavior. That's fine. But the state has no right. The state should really be cautious about criminalizing it. Because the implications of putting somebody in jail for 5 to 10 years because of who they say they are is a problem. If we want to resolve some of the issues arising out of our concern about LGBTI people and even their activity, a bill like this is only going to drive them underground.
Okay, let me quickly bring in Adam Senanu. I'll come to Prof. Etienne again, and then I'll get to my other MP in the studio. Adam, there is a part of the bill that those advocating against it have cited to back their point of how this is just too extensive a breach on freedom of expression. Adam, it says, and this is under the section 12(2), says a person who engages in or participates in an activity that promotes or supports a sympathy for an act prohibited under this act. I mean, how do you even begin to criminalize sympathy, Adam? Well, we lost Adam there. He's back. Okay, we lost him. I'll come to Professor Page. But you say you support the bill. Yes. How do you justify that? For example, how do you criminalize sympathy for people who say they're gay and lesbians?
No, you see, this whole thing, Evans, I don't know what the fear of those against this bill are. What their fears? You just read to her that the rights of these people are equally protected just like anybody at all. Look, you remember when portions of an academic textbook and something found its way there, you realize the uproar of the society. You are dealing with about 30 million population, and about 98% tells you we abhor this. I'm not on my own. On these, I represent a group of people. And what the people are saying is what we should be prepared to listen to. We don't represent ourselves in Parliament.
Yeah.
And every day, we're on the same committee, it's a deputy ranking. Every day you go out, people are telling you, we don't want this. what is it that the opponent of this bill, you talk about right, and it tells you the right is enshrined in a piece of legislation that is going through a process. But for me, I think that we should allow everybody to speak or to talk. And that's the essence of democracy. Our democracy is growing.
Yeah, but you can't say that and put in the bill that may pass into law an act that criminalizes sympathy.
No, but you see, I don't get that. For instance, we all know what is happening.
So now you say, let's all talk. It's good.
We're talking.
But when it comes to gay and lesbian, after this bill is passed, no, we can't all.
That's why we are talking now. That's why we are here. We're spending time to discuss this matter. It's been discussed on many platforms, and it's still being discussed. The sympathy, that you have sympathy for people who profess that, you know, they started from saying that every those in that group of a category it's scientific.
Yeah.
And every day the argument keeps changing. Every day the argument keeps changing, and it's changing, it's changing. But look, the fact is that the plus, if you ask them, if you are not careful, somebody will wake up one day and say, look, I want to get married to the dog out there, and I have my right. So can we have a society without set of rules to regulate? When we talk of right, and somebody asked yesterday, the effect of this on the society, that is why we want to regulate it. Do you know how much government spends on antiretroviral drugs? And the medical scientists are telling us, the data is telling us that those who have sex with the same sex, especially gay people, are prone to contract HIV on a higher rate than those who have sex with the opposite sex. So it has its own economic implications and all that. And government is spending a lot of money, in excess of over $200 million, to substitute the cost of antiretroviral drugs. And this is society. Are you saying that we should all allow? If you wake up today and you say, me, my right is that I can marry a dog. And we are getting to a stage that the person will say, even this tree, me, I'm married to the tree, and nobody can say anything about it. So for me, we represent people. The duty of a member of parliament is to ensure that the right of every Ghanaian is protected. And that's what we are doing. We are not doing anything different from what they are asking us to do.
Let me put that to Professor Apejetia. Prof, hopefully we can have a stable connection to you. I mean, the members of parliament, what their job is to represent us. They are, in essence, just doing our bidding. We employ them. If 93% of us say we don't want this, they simply are bound to obey and pass this act because it reflects the wishes, aspirations, values, and culture of an overwhelming majority, 93% at least according to the CDD. So really, when you say in your bill that, quote, in the memo to Parliament, some strong words of Parliament, you say that you consider it unbecoming of Parliament to initiate such a fanatical crusade of intolerance and extremism in the 21st century. Aren't you simply being unfair to a group of people whose job is simply to represent the views of their constituents? And the views of their constituents, 93% of them say, we don't want this. How do you respond to that?
Thank you. I think that's, well, first of all, I'm not one of the signatories to that particular memo.
Okay.
But my view is that when you are talking about homosexuality issues, it has entered the realm of human rights. So human rights discourse, when you are discussing it, to be able to say that you are criminalizing human rights becomes a very difficult position that you can justify. And so when we are talking in that context, still, that's why I was talking about the fact that for each country or region, they allowed some level of margin of appreciation whereby a particular region or country can take into account its peculiarities when it's addressing human rights issues. But it doesn't go to the extreme of saying we are criminalizing a particular human rights issue. When we look at the homosexuality issues we're talking about now, I was trying to make the points somewhere along the line, but the connectivity was not good. you try to draw the line with respect to this homosexuality debate into the expression of sexuality and then the discrimination part. So the church, the mosque can say that this is an issue of morality, sin, and therefore we are not, will not go with that. We disagree with that particular practice. That is fair enough. But the other side is where you are discriminating against the person, and Mr. George was making the point that if you commit any act, any other crime, you are not entitled to have the right to work, for example. No, the law is saying that people should be given the opportunity to reintegrate into the society. Once a criminal doesn't always make you a criminal. But in this particular case, even in this particular case, the person has not been taken to court and to be tried and convicted and sentenced. But you are saying that because of the person's identification with a particular sexuality, that person should not be entitled to work. That is where I disagree with their position. And that's why I think the rights issue comes in. And it is critical that we look at that. The issue of the question of criminalizing sympathy was not addressed. And I think it's one of the questions that we need to come back to. So the fear is that when we are talking about lawmaking process, it is one thing to couch the law and to draft it nicely. But a lot of work needs to go into crafting the law. So that is why, for example, if you look at the mandate of the Law Reform Commission, it is supposed to review laws based on appropriate research. So a law should be based on appropriate research. The idea that human rights is a communal thing in the African context has been debunked a long time ago. Human rights, basically in the African context, is individually driven. It has a communal component to it as well, but it is individually driven. And so when we are talking about human rights in this context, we are saying that yes, 97% or so of Ghanaians say they are not in favor of gay and lesbian rights. But it is something that is snowballing. Culture is not static. It is dynamic and it changes here and there. And so we are having a situation where if we are not careful and we have this law come into place. I was talking about lawmaking process. The other part is the consequences, the unintended consequences if the law is not crafted properly. It will lead to either the law is ineffective, it doesn't work, or it can lead to unintended consequences. A good example is the Nkranza one we're talking about. So the people will not know the law, the extent of the law, and will talk about and take things into their own hands. It is not that we have not read the law, Mr. George. We have read the law, we understand it, and we know what may come out of it. Some of the interpretation you are giving is what you are giving to us on the platform right now. But when you read the law, the bill carefully, that is not where it leads to. And it will lead to consequences, even, for example, saying that the judiciary should promote the law, SHRA should promote the law, NCC should promote the law. These are constitutionally mandated bodies that have particular functions. If, for example, somebody has an issue with maybe practicing gay rights and he has been beaten and he's taking the matter to SHRA, SHRA is supposed to be an independent arbiter to determine the matter, the same as the courts. So you cannot expect SHRA and these bodies to be promoting the bill. So that is where we need to fundamentally examine the case and say that the majority at this moment is saying that they don't like the law. But it is not the pro-gay people who are promoting this bill. It is rather from the anti-gay section. So it is not a question of the pro-gay people trying to impose the law in the country. You can talk about the fact that there were previous attempts by some states, for example, Australia and so on, and some people from some EU countries trying to set up a sort of space for people to express their gay rights and to promote it. That is fundamentally against the sovereign rights of Ghana. And what Ghana should have done, the government of Ghana should have done, was to have called the ambassadors of these countries to tell them that no, that is an infringement on the rights of the country as a sovereign country. But one thing we also need to note is that when you're a sovereign country and you join international organizations, you cede part of your sovereignty. So it allows the UN, the AU, ECOWAS, and so on to intervene when there are some rights violations. But at the same time, what we need to know, which is when you refer to the Human Rights Council, it allows for the margin of operation I'm talking about, that when an issue, a human rights issue comes up, they try to look at the peculiarities of a particular country and its culture and history to say that between the individual interests and state interests, we don't need to use the same bar to measure whether this right is being violated or not. There can be some exceptions to the rule. And that is where we need to look at so that we can use that space to promote a more tolerant approach to dealing with this matter instead of the militant, aggressive approach, which in the end would drive the practice underground. Okay. And the consequences will be huge. I was talking about the drug issue. Again, the same issue, it was seen as a deviant issue. The church called for its criminalization, and the consequences today have been huge for the society, negative. And so if we are not careful, the same situation is going to happen with the homosexuality bill we are promoting here.
So Prof, and just very briefly, this is a very comprehensive all-rounded bill. Is it that you don't want this bill passed at all, or there are aspects of this bill that can pass?
The bill as its present form should not be allowed to pass.
Okay, so stay with me. However, yes.
However, the law as it is generally on homosexuality needs to be reviewed. Because
what law are you referring to here?
I'm talking about the criminal
on natural conduct knowledge. Okay, needs to be reviewed to do what exactly?
Well, the law as it is now, there are aspects of it that criminalizes heterosexual activities, and so there's a need to look at that.
Okay, so sorry, because of time. So just on that, it criminalizes heterosexual activities. Look at that, but what about the other side, the homosexual activity?
Yeah, the homosexual side too, it is not comprehensive. It's only limited to, when we are talking about the fact that there should be carnal knowledge, which is talking about the least amount of penetration. It means that it is something that can happen between a male and male, where there's anal penetration.
Yeah, but Prof, if you read the memo attached to the bill, this is exactly what the bill's trying to do, to make it a bit more comprehensive, flesh out that unnatural carnal knowledge part of our law and make it a bit more comprehensive, more rounded.
Yes, but the way it doesn't stand on its own. It is linked to other rights issues which make it, by criminalizing other rights issues, which therefore violates the rights that the duty on Ghana as a member of the UN, as a member of the AU and so on, to respect those rights. Because much as the Human Rights Council, for example, has indicated that every country should take into account its political, cultural, religious setup to determine how it addresses the homosexuality issue. Okay. It also says that there's a limit to which each country can go.
Okay, Prof, thank you. Stay with me. I'll come to you very shortly because I've just been joined by Prof. Charles Godfred Aka, Associate Professor of Economics. It joins us very briefly. I want to take a quick thought on him. I'll take a break and return and get, and so we can move the conversation on a bit more to, so what happens now? We've seen the international dimensions to this playing out. To what extent are we bothered by that consequence that may come along? Professor Charles Godfred Aka, thank you for connecting with us. Where do you stand on this? Are you for or against? And what's your brief position on this, very briefly?
Well, you mean I'm for or against homosexuality?
No, the bill. The bill. We're talking about the bill.
Well, I'm totally for the bill. Of course, we can discuss aspects of the bill that needs to be enhanced or revised, but in totality as a bill that needs to control this particular behavior or practice, I'm totally in support.
So let me ask you then. The argument from the other side says, I mean, in Ghana, I live in a community where gays and lesbians were all over, right? We've lived with them in the shadows for so long. I mean, almost everybody knows somebody who is gay in Ghana, I mean, or suspects to be gay. They haven't hurt us. We've lived with them in nicely. There's nothing. It hasn't. Why must we pass a law that explicitly outlaws the activities? What is the need for that now?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think we need to look at the history. So basically, it is the fact that in terms of people committing deviant behavior, homosexuality, pornography, polygamy, whatever it is, alcoholism, drugs, in almost every society you find such things. Now, the other issue is, do you allow this to become part of the culture? Do you legalize it? Or do you just keep quiet? Or do you have laws and regulations to control it? And I think what is beginning to happen, I mean, it depends on how you look at it. From our own culture, it's very clear if you look at all our cultural studies, right from primary school. We are now being called to revise all our textbooks, all the things we have taught in religious and moral education, all the things we have taught in social studies. If you pick any textbook on social studies now, in JHS or SHS, or on religious and moral education, it's clear that homosexuality is one of the vices, is a sin, or is an evil. It's not good, it's not acceptable. Okay, now, some people began to wake up in a few years ago. They belong to the enlightened age. There are people that have now begun to see that religion has no place in our society, and the human beings themselves should be given the preference and the liberty to do whatever they like, and society has no reason to interfere. That is what has brought us to where we are now. Those who are supporting the bill, the law, who are against the bill, and they are speaking about liberties and human rights, they are trying to tell us that it's only today or a few years ago that the US became progressive, that Europe or Switzerland, just 2 weeks ago, Switzerland was not a progressive society. They were archaic. They didn't have sense. These countries, when they were developing, in the times that they are struggling with their development, when their health systems were not developed, when they did not have the budget to be able to take care of these issues, they criminalized it. They knew the consequence of things like homosexuality. They criminalized drugs. They criminalized pornography, indecency, anything that they saw that was going to have a negative consequences on the moral ecology. You see, when people behave, do something, it all affects them personally, and it affects the environment. Our environment is both material and spiritual. And just like we try to regulate galamsey, or we try to regulate the environmental pollution, we cannot say that when people, no matter their human rights, when people are polluting water or rivers, we should allow them. Or when people in China now or in other countries, they are trying to, doing business and trying to produce, they are polluting the environment so that we have climate change, the whole world should sit down. There are laws in the US now, in California, in Texas, in many states, they are passing laws to even ban the use of cars that rely on fuel, on diesel. It should be people's human right and personal liberty to drive whatever car they want and whether they want to drive. But the state says, no, we want to go emission-free. We want to go and have a society which is clean. So therefore, from 2035, nobody living in California will be allowed to drive a car that uses diesel, and it's a law. Now, how can anybody live there and say that this is against my human right? We in Ghana now, we were driving somewhere on the left of the roadside. We now decided that we pass a law that will make us to drive on the right. That is not against human rights. During this COVID, a lot of liberties have been restricted. Many of us could not go out. We are being asked to wear masks compulsorily. Nobody is saying that it's against my human rights. You are forcing me to wear masks, or you are closing churches and gatherings because it's for the common good. What we are saying is that this matter is going beyond private individuals misbehaving or doing things at home. It's now becoming a culture. It's becoming a religion. It's becoming a movement. And they are now asking that they must be legalized. Now, mind you, in the countries where they have been legalized, like in the US, for example, there are several court cases now. Because once you first accept that this is a human right, and that's where the argument actually falls. That's where we must start. They are saying it's a human right because you cannot claim to a human right of something that does not exist. This issue, we are not talking about their humanity. They are human beings. But the human right that they are referring to is talking about gender. In Ghana, in our culture, in our history, gender is woman and man, male and female. There's nothing in between. So that discrimination of human rights issue is looking at these two people. Now, these people are asking us that we should discard the long-cherished definition of sex or gender and now begin to include a third one. And that third one is what they call LGBTQ. And then we should now accord all the rights that we give to men and women and accord it to these people that they call themselves transgender or homosexual also. And therefore, if we accept it, and there's no empirical basis for that, there's no scientific basis for that, everything just collapses, that this is a preference. When they started this movement, they say it was a sexual preference. When the argument, they realized that they were losing the argument, the next is an orientation. And they now begin to adduce some kind of evidence, which did not stand the test of time, to say that they are born gay. And if we accept that they are born gay, then it means that that is who they are. And there's no evidence to that. It is not who they are, it is what they want to do.
Okay. So that's a preference. That's a preference argument.
Control it.
Very passionate thoughts there. I want to take a break. When I return, Sam George will tell us why he is attempting to criminalize sympathy. And then I will read a few of your messages, and then we'll look at the international dimension to this. Sam George has been on CNN, and CNN described it as harsh. The world is watching us very closely. Can we afford the international consequences to this? A country that still largely depends on aid. Stay with me.
Hello, I'm Dori Nando. You can catch up with all the fun on the Cosmopolitan Mix and on all our shows via podcast. Just go to My Joy Online podcast and search for your favorite show and relive those moments all over again. Only on Joy 99.7 FM, radio for discerning listeners.
Super Hits Radio, Joy 99.7.
And thank you very much for staying with us here on Newsfile. It's been a pretty exciting conversation about LGBT. It's all it is when you're talking about gay and lesbian rights and the bill before Parliament. My guests have been Professor Audrey Gajekpo, Dean of School of Information Communication Studies, Sam George, who is the chief proponent of the bill, a sponsor, in fact. He's MP for Nego Prampan, Sylvester Tete, MP for Botiano English and Manfro. We had Adam Senanu also join us, Professor Charles Godfred Aka, Professor PJ Etienne, School of Law, University of Ghana. Now, I want to wrap up this conversation, but there is a contentious issue that came up that Prof. PJ Etienne had challenged Sam George to take on, which is the part of the bill which says, in essence, that you cannot be found to be sympathizing, a person who engages or participates in the activity that promotes or supports sympathy for an act prohibited under this act commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a term of imprisonment of not less than 5 years and not more than 10 years. So, George, how do you criminalize sympathy?
All right, thank you. Quite a number of issues were raised. I'll start with the sympathy one and just quickly rush through the rest. Section 12.2 that you read says a person who engages in or participates in an activity that promotes or supports sympathy for an act prohibited. So it's not sympathy for the person, it's sympathy for the act. So if you are showing sympathy for the act of homosexuality, any act of homosexuality, which will include but not limited to public advocacy, that shows you are sympathetic towards the cause. That which will include opening of an office, or offering support services for the expansion, that is sympathy for a cause. When we say sympathy for an act, it is not sympathy for a person. That's why I said people must read this carefully. We're not saying if you show sympathy for an LGBTQ person, you are falling foul of the law. No. Sympathy for a cause. Joy FM has sympathy for the war on Galamsey. You have dedicated airtime and resources, your journalist, to fight the scourge of Galamsey. That shows you have sympathy for a cause. Your sympathy is not for individuals, it's for the cause. And that's why this bill says any person who engages in or participates in an activity that promotes or supports sympathy for an act. So they should not misconstrue sympathy for an act to mean sympathy for a person. Again, anybody who engages in or promotes a change of public opinion, that is the advocacy part, where you want to open up an LGBTQ office to begin to advocate. It's tantamount to you telling me you want to open up an advocacy office for prostitution or for any other offense. So that clarifies that. Prof asked a very, Professor Odrigajipo made a statement about intersex. Again, Prof, I do have some respect for you, and I plead with you to read the bill well. If you read the bill, and clearly it shows me that people have not understood the bill. And I think that the next focus should be on public sensitization and education. If Prof is falling foul here, I wonder what the ordinary Ghanaian will do. Because when you read Section 6 of the bill, which is Clause 6 of the bill, which is what lists the offenses, Prof makes reference to persons born intersex and says that we're discriminating against them. But if she's read the bill, I will read it. 6, it talks about what the offenses are. It says a person commits an offense if they engage in sexual blah blah blah. But E is what lists the various shades of homosexuality. It says holds out as I, a lesbian, I, a gay, I, a transgender, IV, a transsexual, V, a queer, VI, a pansexual, VII, an ally, VIII, a non-binary, or IX, any other sexual or gender identity that is contrary to the binary categories of male and female. Then goes on in F. If you read here, you realize that questioning, which is part of the spectrum, has not been mentioned. Intersex, which is part of the spectrum, has not been mentioned. But they haven't read the bill to understand it. So they don't see it in there. But let me even go on. In F, we then say, provides or participates in the provision of a surgical procedure for sex or gender reassignment. Or 2, any other procedure that is intended to create a sexual category other than the sexual category of a person assigned at birth, except, so we introduce an exception clause, except in the case of correcting a biological anomaly, including intersex. So if our learned professors are driven by their emotions and fail to read this clearly and misinform the general public and make categoric statements that this bill is fighting intersex people, when there is clear here in black and white an exception clause that says except in the case of correcting a biological anomaly including intersex. It's here in the bill.
Okay.
Now the last one, please.
And I'll bring in Prof. Gajepo and Prof. Chair to respond to that, and I'll move on.
They make reference to individuals engaged in oral sex. Well, Prof and lawyer, the point here is nobody engaged in oral sex is forming an organization and demanding that you respect their rights. That's the difference. That's what you're missing.
But on matter of knowledge, criminalize the definition according to the Supreme Court.
Fantastic. So if you find somebody guilty of that, prosecute them whether they're heterosexual or homosexual. This bill is focused on homosexuals, and like I said, nobody is demanding, nobody who is engaged in oral sex or any kind of kinky sex is standing up and saying we formed an association, accept our acts as the legal, legitimate way of doing this. Now the very last point is, and this will go to the lawyer, can he establish for me any other instance in the history of legal jurisprudence where you demand a right that has no boundaries? When you ask for a particular right, it is defined within a certain context. The right to association, the right to live, the right to freedom of expression. Tell me how you want the courts to enforce a right that is indeterminate. LGBTQI rights are indeterminate. You know why? They add plus. So what does the plus stand for? So you want the courts to give a right where tomorrow, if somebody wakes up and now tells us that having sex with your own child or your own sibling, which is incest, constitutes the plus. And you say we've given them rights, we've given LGBTQ plus. What is the plus? How can you possibly be demanding legal enforcement of rights that are without boundaries and open?
Okay.
This is where.
Okay, so you've asked a few questions. Let me put it to them. Prof. Gadjapo first. Prof. Hello, Prof. Gadjapo.
Thank you so much. In his last submission, and I'll leave some of the more legal ones because he has a lawyer to address this.
Yes.
He again mentioned, and even in reading the parts in which he defines the issue about the I in the LGBTQ, and just now he just said LGBTQI. That I is intersex. So in many parts of the law, even though he is purporting to say that there's sympathy for intersex, many parts of this law add I to the provision which will be criminalized.
Like which part?
Issue number two, I am so glad that he mentioned the word education, you see. And MP Sam George, with all due respect, don't say we are being emotional. We're being rational. In fact, some people accuse us of being too rational, and that's why we are ignoring how the majority of the people think. Although, as we keep saying, that's what's important in a democracy, that the majority respect the rights of the minority, even if they don't understand where the minority is coming from. There should be constitutional provisions. Now, there are all kinds of analogies that he has made to what is considered criminal behavior, including incest, okay? Including incest. Now, the reason incest is criminalized almost all jurisdictions, including Ghana, and rightly so, is again the power relations, okay? Why should a father decide to have sex with their child, even if the child is an adult? The father is always going to be the father. So there are power relations, and societies protect minorities, particularly people who are powerless within their societies. That's why this is a human rights issue, and you shouldn't take it lightly. The majority of people in Ghana are Christian, but the Constitution makes sure that they also protect the rights of minorities in other religions whose religious practices may not conflict with Christian religious practices. And I keep saying that the Christians are the majority in this country, and Christian values and moralities say that you should have one wife. However, the Muslims who are respected in and are part of this bill, their morality allows them to have more than one wife, and it is protected. So Christians can't touch that, whether they like it or not. You know, and that's important for us to get, because you see, you cannot pick and choose your rights. He talked about education, and that's where we should be starting. We should be educating people, even if we think, if the churches think, and we respect the rights of the churches to determine what their morality is, they should be educating people, not criminalizing them. Because part of this discussion is the implications of what is being suggested in the bill. And I suspect that is why even respected Muslim MPs, like the former Panelists Central Member of Parliament, Inusa Husseini, have declared that the anti-LGBTQI plus bill in its current form is retrogressive. That's exactly our argument. And I mean, you have his quote, it's printed, and I'd like Mr. Sam George to speak to his fellow legislator. We don't think he's being capricious. We don't think he's coming from a position of not reading the bill, because we've read the bill, and we're pointing out to you the problems that the bill will provide. And so we're saying that our starting point in this society should be one that is not so punitive. Okay? Look at how you answer the sympathy issue. Sympathy is broadly defined. Any anybody can define sympathy outside of the way you explained it. And they will be criminalized and punished. So let me just quote what Mr. Inusa Fuseni has been quoted as saying. The law, to be honest with you, is quite retrogressive. Yes, rights are not absolute, but you must only limit those rights where the limitation of those rights is for the public good. The public good has been defined in the Constitution. So you cannot just say that because rights are not absolute, we are passing a law to restrict them. You'll be sending us backwards. I have a lot of issues with the bill. We should not give the state and the police laws they do not ask for. He added, which Ghanaian family values are they seeking to protect? What is Ghanaian family value? Is there a distinguished value which is Ghanaian family? That brings us back to the lack of clarity of the bill. What values are they talking about? It's not specific.
Well, I guess, I mean...
But no, hold on a minute. Let me just finish. And then you can come back respond to me. But with all due respect, we are saying that if you go around the nation and ask Ghanaians, do you like infidelity? What do you think the answer would be? They will say no. They will say no, but nobody is advocating for a law against infidelity, criminalizing infidelity. Yet we know studies, including a study that was done in the University of Ghana that talks about what are the causes of marriage breakdowns. Infidelity is a major one. The lack of gender ideology is a major one. You know what they mean by that? That we decided, and that's Professor Aka, is the definition of gender. You had a wrong definition of gender. We decided on role constructions specified to people's biology. That's gender ideology. So you say, I cannot work because I'm a woman. I cannot study this because I'm a woman. Those are some lack of money, lack of appreciation. You know, so there are studies rooted in Ghana that tell us what breaks down our marriages and undermine our family values. Our starting point should be those things, not other things that we think break down our family values, even if we disagree with it. So yes, you may not like LGBTQI people, and you may be concerned about what it means for the morality of your society, but your starting point should not be sticking them and putting them in jail for 5 to 10 years.
Okay, Prof.
If you're worried about the health issues, they raise a lot of issues. My last point about the health issues and the charge on the public purse. Well, 18% of homosexuals, you say, are HIV positive. But the 22% are what? They are heterosexuals. And again, we know from all of the data that HIV is a problem and it's a charge on the public purse. But if 18%, only 18% of the problem is with homosexuals, then it presumes that the 82% is with heterosexuals. And yet we're not criminalizing heterosexual sex, are we? I'm done.
Okay, Professor. Let me hold on for me, and let me bring Professor Etia in because Sam Jordan asking the question because I need to wrap up very quickly on this. Prof Etia, the question to you was point to a right that has no boundaries and that this one doesn't.
I think I disagree strongly with Mr. George. Rights, when you're talking about evolution of rights, it takes a particular shape or form. No right has a particular way it evolves. It starts as a coalition of people arguing for the right to be recognized, and then it starts as a moral right. Then it leads into the discourse of whether it becomes a legal right or a constitutional right and so on. It is up to every country at a particular point in time to determine that this is the extent to which this right can be recognized.
Yeah, but isn't that what this bill is doing? Isn't that what this bill is doing? To circumscribe?
No, this bill is completely proscribing LGBTQ rights and related rights that people who practice it should enjoy, as ordinarily every human being should enjoy. So it's sort of dehumanizes them in that respect. But when you are talking about rights, there is an endpoint for every right. But every right also will evolve. You talk about a right to life, for example. People talk about euthanasia. People talk about even the right to food as a right to life. So there are different portions of it. Some talk about even suicide and so on. So it is up to the country to determine the parameters of that right, or it's up to the courts to help in that direction. So that point is not a very strong point for Mr. George to canvass. Then the other one is about talking about the Criminal Code and Criminal and Other Offences Act, and then the bill. I was referring to the Criminal and Other Offences Act, and I'm saying that with that particular Criminal and Other Offences Act, the provision of homosexuality, it's not actually about homosexuality, it's about sodomy, and it's about the issue of penetration, making the point that some parts heterosexuals do, but it's all comprehensive. And so I'm saying that there's certainly the need to review our homosexuality law, but the shape and form in which this bill is representing it is trying to go to the extreme end, which will seriously violate the rights of LGBTQ people. The church has the right to talk about morality and the sinfulness of the act itself, which is the expression of the act. But to the extent that other rights are violated, is unbiblical by itself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I need to wrap up on this. Let's come to the next steps. You are a member of Parliament, Sylvester. Yeah. So we understand that the committee responsible has, in essence, finished the memoranda. Parliament is resuming when this week?
26.
26. That's next week. Yeah. You expect that this will pass?
Yes, of course. I mean, I wouldn't sit here to say, but I know, judging from the commentary, and then the position of our colleagues in the House, and let me put it on record that this bill is a joint between the minority and majority. Some members of Parliament from both sides have put this bill together, and if you hear the commentary and then the discussion among members of Parliament, I have no doubt that this bill will pass into law. So for me, I think that it is true when you hear all of them speak. Everybody is for the bill, and they abhor the act of homosexuality, and they fear. What we are seeking to do is to prevent people from openly setting up offices, advertise. If you are not careful, we get to a stage that will have restaurant for gays.
Let me ask you this.
In this country.
Let me ask you, Obribo, your Deputy General Secretary,
yes,
had said that he's surprised that MPP MPs aren't openly supporting the anti-LGBTQ bill.
Well, I'm not sure the work of Parliament. It's not everybody that goes on radio for that matter. And I think that when we go back to the House, obviously, majority of the people I've spoken to for the bill. I've not spoken to everybody anyways, but he might not have heard MPP MPs not speaking for it. But I know quite a number of MPs who are speaking for the bill. And if for a reason that is not hearing them, it doesn't mean that the members of Parliament are not supporting the bill. I'm here. I've declared my stance for the bill. And I think that majority of the colleagues in the House will also support the bill to pass. People should hold their guns with this issue of abuse of rights of other people. Yes, everybody has a right, and we kept making that point, that if you are not careful, tomorrow a prostitute will come to say that we have a right. Our right is that we cannot stay with one man, and we cannot live without a prostitution. So for that reason, give us our liberty. The police is always arresting them and trying to put them through the process. But I think that we've come very far, listening to the traditional authorities, the general public. Put your media men out there on the street, and you realize that they are up for it. And I think that if the majority of our citizens are for it, then why not? We should go for it and ensure that we bring some sanity. Okay. Everybody who has spoken about this has shown concern about the surge and then the foreign intrusion, to the extent that you have diplomats in this country leading the charge to ensure that we stop the bill. I mean, that's quite unfortunate.
Let me bring in Professor Godfred Aka. Prof, just a quick final thoughts for you. Quick 2 minutes. because also you are a professor of economics, I need to pull this to you. I know you work with ISA. I mean, this is a country that largely depends on international aid and donor support. There are possible real consequences for Ghana, is there not, when the West is quite clear on this position on this matter, if we go ahead and push through this bill in the form it is without at least factoring in the concerns of Dr. Rigajapo and others who raised this issue in the last few days. From your point of view and the perspective that you come from economics background, there could be consequences for us. And the question is whether, I mean, how much are we willing to give away just so to pass this law?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I joined late, so I wish I could have 5 minutes, but no.
All right, so 2 minutes. I just have 2 minutes on this, so 2 minutes strictly.
Yes, but because we are doing a public event, let me respectfully reject the definition that Professor Gojipo was trying to give me as far as gender is concerned. What I was talking about is gender identity. Gender identity, according to the LGBT community, they are advocating a gender identity, which is a subjective internal sense of being a man or a woman. And we say this is not a subjective issue. This is determined right at birth. You are born a male or a female. And a male you must feel as a man, and a female you feel as a woman. Clearly there's no definition. They are now changing this to an orientation that says that somebody is born, not a male or a female. And there's another third category, and we reject that. And that definition of intersex is not talking about hermaphrodite, which, okay, that is an anomaly. It's an abnormality that can be corrected. This intersex that is LGBTQI is sexuality. It's talking about the fact that somebody doesn't feel a male or neither feels a female or feels both. And therefore, if one person who is born as a male, he now feels as a woman and can therefore marry a man. And another time can feel as a man and marry a woman. That is a sexuality which we reject. It's different from somebody who is born with an organ that it's having a hermaphrodite.
Yeah, Prof. So yeah, to the question now, very briefly.
To the question, yes, please. I've submitted a memo on this, and I've made very strong arguments, even on the economic front. And what I think you need to know is clear that yes, we may suffer some foreign aid here and there. But already the president said Ghana without aid. There's enough resources. This country, our heritage, we are blessed with enough resources, human, natural, to be able to live and develop without begging and without anybody telling us what to do. You must also know that there are economic implications, very dire economic implications, and it's in my argument. And that's the reason why none of these European countries or America legalized homosexuality at the time that they were developing countries, because it comes with cost. The health cost alone is dire. You see that we don't even have enough budget to fight HIV/AIDS. HIV/AIDS budget is funded, is donor. Look at this COVID. We don't have budget to fight COVID. We are relying on COVAX. They have enough money whenever there's an epidemic. This is going to increase the HIV/AIDS. It's going to lead to public health, a challenge even on our health system. We don't have what it takes. We are not comprehensively insured. We don't have our social health system or NHIS already to take that. There, you can have all of those resources. When they want to do surgery, they want to do intersex, they want to do hormone it's paid for by the state. We don't have that kind of thing here. So even on economic relations, if you look at the ILO publication, they have already said that AIDS has shattered many economies. And the UNAIDS themselves said that AIDS is coming mainly from anal sex. 70% of all people who have AIDS in the US, it came from the men and men marrying or having sex. So what it means is that we are going to reverse all our efforts in trying to control AIDS in this country. And it's going to put our budget, and because meanwhile the Constitution in Section 40 also said that the government must manage the economy properly. This will be a mismanagement of economy when we deliberately go into a culture that is going to lead us to be going back to beg. We'll go back to these people again and beg them for funds to fight the health consequence that is going to come with this. And I don't think it's a wise decision to make. Okay,
Prof. Charles Godfrey-Daka, thank you very much. Some George, final words to you. The time has closed for memoranda, correct? From what I understand.
Yes.
What happens now?
The committee is going to sit down, the secretariat to sit down and winnow it through and present all the memos, over 100 of them, to the committee. Committee members will then look at it, peruse it. There'll be a consultative forum, stakeholders forum, where all the key persons who've sent in memoranda will be invited to meet with the committee and the sponsors of the bill. Then we go through all the amendments that will possibly come up, and then those amendments will be put before Parliament for the second consideration stage, where we will debate all the amendments, finally fine-tune the bill, and have and it will go through hopefully, and then we'll have the third reading, which will pass it into law. But just before I go, or before you wrap up, I beg you 2 minutes to just address this. There's this misconception that this is a religious bill. I've heard Professor Gajipo say the church. This has look, this is a bill based on Article 39 of the Constitution, which talks about the cultural integration of appropriate customary values. She asks what are Ghanaian values. The same Constitution says that the National House of Chiefs is the custodian of our customary values. The National House of Chiefs have spoken explicitly on what are Ghanaian family values. So that is the source she should go and get that information on what Ghanaian family values are, and what the formation of a family, what the family unit in Ghana is, a unit of a man and a woman marrying to become a family. That's what Ghanaian family values are. Where the church and the objects of our culture align, we would always work together. And the issue of resources and challenges, look, Ghana is a more economically stable country than Uganda. Uganda passed a more draconian bill. In fact, Uganda's bill was to kill the gays, because they actually sentenced them to death for homosexuality. Uganda passed this bill. It's been almost 6 years. Nothing has happened to Uganda. Uganda is still standing on its feet. Uganda is benefiting from COVAX, just like Ghana. So the whole hysteria that is being created by proponents of LGBTQ, that Ghana is going to suffer something. Look, there are 195 countries in the world. Only 33 have legalized homosexuality. Nothing is going to happen to Ghana. Nigeria passed a harsher bill, a stronger bill. Let me use that, a stronger bill with more punitive measures for homosexuals in 2014. Nigeria is there. Nobody did anything to Nigeria. Nobody will do anything to Ghana. We're a sovereign nation. We will hold our own. They need us as much as we need them.
That's George. Thank you very much also for joining us. That is Sylvester, who will join me in the studio, George also, and all of you who have listened in. I'll be reading many of your messages to you very shortly, sharing with the rest of the world. Adam Senanu joined us earlier, Governing Council member, the National Coalition for Proper Human Sexual Rights, Professor Audrey Gajipo, Dean, School of Information Communication Studies, Professor Pierre J. Chia, School of Law, and of course, Professor Charles Godfrey Daka, Associate Professor of Economics. We're going to shuffle the park, and we are asking a simple question. What on earth is happening at the Tema oil refinery after this break?
Hi, this is Lexus Bill, host of Drive Time on Joy 99.7 FM. Listen, you don't have to worry if you miss Drive Time or Personality Profile. It's going to be live on our podcast page. Just log on to www.myjoyonline.com/podcast. You can listen to Drive Time, Personality Profile, and any other of your favorite shows on Joy FM on that page. You don't have to miss a show at all. Joy 99.7 FM, radio for discerning listeners.
And you're still live with us here on Newsfile. It's been a pretty exciting conversation so far on the first part, where we talked about the LG anti-gay bill, which is before Parliament. Let's talk about TOR now, and my guests are joining me shortly. But before I do that, I want to share a few of your messages coming in on the subject we just looked at on the gay issue. As you can guess, it's one of those very emotive subjects, and so the views are quite a lot. This is from Numbo on Twitter. Says, yes, one can be academically knowledgeable and still support LGBTQ, but no man can say he's of good morals and still promote homosexuality because it's against our values. Papa says, Professor Gajipo should tell us how homosexuality can be biological. Please, anyone close to her should tell her we are not joking, with all due respect. K. Amofa says the bill simply frown on the promotion of homosexuality in discussions. We all understand that. We do talk about armed robbery in an educative sense to prevent it. The so-called human rights experts should understand it. Kweku says, in fact, Newsfile, some George and his fellows, they have a huge responsibility to sensitize the whole nation on the bill, because it's either you haven't read the bill or you have read the bill but you do not understand it. Another one says at AQ, Kosia says, not this woman saying God created LGBTQ people. I beg, she should not associate God to this one. He created mankind, but did not usher them into the act of being LGBTQ persons. That's hashtag Newsfile. Let me read a few more. This one from Nyavo says, it's really a shame that uneducated, well, of course, you can't use those terms on Panelists. You simply express your view, but we won't allow. He says, well, Amofat says, I thought Ghana was a republic. Let's consider what is in the interest of Ghana and not consider the UN and so on. He argues there. But Faisal says, Professor PJ, we know and it's true that culture is dynamic, but on this LGBTQ plus issue, we will never change our way of life. The bill has to pass. AJ says, rights have limits. You should know about that. Our people say that the fact that no animal should feed on the other doesn't mean the mouse can just be playing in front of the cat anyhow. In this adage, the mouse has freedom and the right, but it ends somewhere. And the final one, Oscar says, the people with almost a unanimous decision are against this. Why should we prolong this matter? So those are a few of your views on the issue. It's a very emotive subject, and I'm pretty sure it will continue until the bill is passed or rejected in Parliament. We see how that unfolds. Let's talk about the Tema oil refinery now. And this week we woke up to news published by the Interim Management Committee that they have discovered the disappearance of 150,000 plus gas oil on 4th of September and belonging to a BDC client. Also, the wrongful loading of 250,000 liters of aviation turbine kerosene, the disappearance of 18 drums of electrical cable worth 10.4 million. And then they go back to 2012 and 2015, where they tell us that there was further disappearance of some LPG amounting to 4.8 million. And then we learn, as we interrogated this further, that apparently it is actually the tip of a massive gargantuan iceberg, which has been happening at all for decades without any proper solutions to it. So let's have that conversation now. Some say applaud the work of the IMC. Others say what for? Dissolve them. I want to bring in John Kintampo. He is a member of parliament for Yape Kusogu. He's a minority spokesperson on mines and energy. They issued a statement this week on this particular matter. Sylvester Tete is still with me. Is the MP for Botiano English and Manfro. Senor Hosi is joining me in the studio now. He's a CEO of the Ghana Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors. Has some very interesting views on how to fix this particular problem permanently. Professor Kwesi Eden is Director of Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center, and joins us via Zoom as well. They are very interesting. What networks, for example, encourage this very pervasive, persistent corruption, siphoning of products at all? That's where I want to tap into Professor Eden's expertise a bit more into it, and how you don't just deal with it as an oil and gas matter, adopt a very thorough forensic approach to tracking and following the money and finding the people who are actually at the helm of this particular matter. It's a security question also, and he will give us his thought. But I want to start with you, Mr. Hosi. So you've said a lot this week, but I doubt there's anything you said this week that you haven't said already before this came to light about Tor. It must really frustrate you.
Well, I'm sure you must have observed I've been on some media hibernation till last week. So,
yes.
Because sometimes the issues in Ghana, it's easy to solve, it's clear, but the will is not there. And for some of us who keep advocating, working up, putting up policy documents, spending time on this and seeing little to no progress, it is frustrating and just sometimes feel like giving up.
Yeah, but the millions and millions that we are losing at all, and some of your members, as we've said, BDC's clients are losing it's not something that you could just let go.
We can't let go, but I think government is very comfortable with it because all that happens is that they keep coming up with a new mechanism to pay off the debt, and that mechanism is taxing the people more to pay their debt. So I just don't think that governments have really been interested in really solving it honestly. The other bit to it is that for me, TOR has been a piggy bank for most politically active people. So
please explain that, because this is a company that is losing billions of cedis over the last decade. Look, so how is that?
People are benefiting from that losses. So once there are people benefiting from it, it can only be within a certain class that you would have that. So will you keep losing? Do you think multimedia will keep losing money like this and will just sit by? Kwesichum will sit by. It won't happen. You know. So if it's happening, then it means that there's an implied complicity on the owners of the whole thing. Because I don't think there's been the commitment. I mean, this IMC has done a great job. I'm very happy about the minister's drive on this particular matter for possibly one of the first times in a long while. So let's have an honest conversation. I mean, do we want to continue doing this? Kufo started this, trying to deal with the issues of TOR. It was about $400 million at the time. We brought in the TOR debt recovery levy. We have contributed now close to about $1.3 billion US.
Through taxes?
Through the TOR debt recovery levy, yes. You know, the last time I realized I didn't add a part of the 2021 one. So you're almost at 1.3 billion. We've actually spent from out of the ESLA that's 1.3 billion US dollars. Out of the ESLA, we've paid about 2.8 billion Ghana cedis. And once that 2.8 billion Ghana cedis is gone, it means that we're going to collect taxes for possibly another 10 years or another 7 years from now to even be able to recover that 2.8 billion. Who is paying for it? Tema Refinery is a limited liability company. We all forget. It is not a special corporation. It's not an institution of the state. It's not. It's just a limited liability company owned by the state. And I've said it here. The reason is simple. The directing mind of a TOR in Ghana as is today is not the directing mind that anybody will use to run their own businesses. All right, no private sector runs like that. But a limited liability company must run like that. It doesn't matter who the shareholders are. The board of directors have a certain fiduciary responsibility to optimize the value of the entity. So optimize profit, run efficiently, and run responsibly in the state. We've not had that in a very long time, and it's simple. The objectives of commerce are not the objectives in TOR.
So what is the objective of TOR then?
One, for the general engineers, they just want to see the machine running. The politician wants to just claim that refining is happening. You fill the board with politically active people with no clear commercial responsibility, all right, at all. Nothing happens there that any of them will be held responsible. All right, show me the last time we held any board member of TOR responsible for anything. You just sacked them, what happens? And so what? Okay. So if you create losses and you pretend this, what happens? There are fiduciary responsibilities as a director. You should be careful when you take the role of a director. Nothing happens to anybody. All right, you see, board members, I'll just share a little story. My entry into this industry started with an engagement led by a politician in TOR. And the conversation was about some crude cargo coming in. And the conversation was about what part had to go to somebody and what part had to go to somebody. That whole transaction was a fluke because I was in structured trade finance. And that's how come I realized that TOR was never going to go anywhere. Because from board members to whoever it is, from politicians to party activists, everybody is looking for one kind of deal that you can get out of TOR at any point in time. That is the truth. You get politicians putting in staff, workers, and their families, friends, all kinds of people in there. How can a 45 barrel a day refinery be run by over 1,000 people? You know, last time we got the Dangote, technical advisor at the Ghana International Petroleum Conference, and he couldn't believe it. He said that refinery should not be run by more than 100 people. Top it up 150. But you have what? 1,000 people there. And today, if I'm MD of TOR or you are made MD of TOR, somebody will call you, please, get this person and put there. The last time the union, if I'm not mistaken, raised some complaints at the ministry where they were saying that national service personnel of over 100 have been pushed there. Meanwhile, they are there sitting there and they can't actually even get salaries to pay the real workers. This was some of the concerns that people had. Who is behind all these things? That's why, to cut this whole story short, we can't keep bleeding the poor man, poor Ghana man every day by just the fact that we know that when we just slap a tax on petroleum, it will be paid. We can't continue that. That is bad policy making. I went to Pantan Hospital, GSS and Primary today. It was a sorry sight. And I don't really think that politicians, when they travel and they see the poverty in this country, they should really be running the country sometimes the way we do. It is very disheartening. You go to schools where people just have to defecate only in the bush because the one toilet that's there is only for the headmaster. You understand? And then we sit here and then we waste money, lose money carelessly. It is heartbreaking.
Let me bring in John Junapol. They issued a statement this week. John, Senor Hossi says that the IMC has done a great job, and I think he believes that at least it's a start. It's a start to trying to take on the problem. You agree?
By doing what? That's the question. By allowing that parcel of crude to be missing, or because the BDC comes knocking on the door and asking for their crude, they have no choice than to institute a probe. What they should have done was to prevent this huge loss, first of all. And when the minister sworn in this IMC, it was clear that there were losses, and this IMC was supposed to move in and curtail such losses. Don't forget, this is not TOR's oil. This is oil belonging to a private company that decided to rent the facilities of TOR. TOR's core business is not even to be renting those tanks to BDCs. BDCs originally are supposed to have their own tank farms, import their finished products and sell. TOR hasn't been operating efficiently for quite a while, and we all agree. It's a capacity that can do about 45,000 barrels from the CDU, 14,000 barrels from the RFCC. And so in terms of numbers, they can ramp up and do something. But like Senor said, there are real challenges with TOR. Indeed, I've just been looking at the energy debt. As at 31st August 2017, the total energy debt was about 9.2 billion. 22% of that was attributable to TOR.
Wow.
And so when you strike the 22%, that's about 2 billion. Now there's no more TOR debt recovery levy. All those levies were consolidated into the Energy Sector Levies Act. And you have the energy debt recovery levy, part of which must be used to settle the TOR debt. So far, about 5 billion has been transferred to ESLA PLC. And yet, as I speak to you, TOR's debt, based on our meeting with them, that is the Mines and Energy Committee, at the last meeting, is about 3 billion cedis as I speak to you currently. In fact, in 2019, just 4 months, they made a loss of 186 million. Don't forget, the minister told us in 2018 that TOR was going to be turned into a tank farm, and that a new refinery will be established in Takoradi. That refinery, according to him, would cost about 4 billion. And so the question is that within this period, what have we done? I think that is very important. I think that government officials and those at the helm of affairs must tell us exactly what they have done. And like Sonia said, it's a limited liability company. Strictly speaking, it is the board that ought to be appointing management. The job of the shareholder or the ministry, or in this case, it's now the shares has been transferred to what's the name?
SIGA.
SIGA. The president was sworn in since January. I mean, TOR is a strategic asset. It's the only refinery in this country. How come for close to 1 year, we simply cannot inaugurate a board for TOR? What's happening? Is it that we don't have the men? To understand that a 3-member IMC ought to be managing the limited liability company. I disagree that IMC is even necessary. I think that a substantive MD ought to be appointed, devoid of partisan parochial interest. I hold the view that a board ought to be established and inaugurated. Give the board KPIs, tax them, let the board tell you the tools they need. what can we do to ensure that that board functions effectively? If they don't function, clear that board. And then the board will then appoint a managing director and also task the managing director to achieve certain KPIs. If that doesn't happen, the board has the authority to fire them. I don't think that should be the job of a minister to be stepping in and appointing IMCs and all that. A limited liability company must function like a limited liability company. Is that how limited liabilities companies function? That's not how they function. The shareholder doesn't just move in and appoint an IMC. It's long overdue. This IMC, I hold the view that they were supposed to prevent these losses. That has not happened. It's time that we constitute a board. It's time that we appoint a managing director, tax them, and also look at the long-term view of TOR. Like we all say, with the numbers, because for a typical refinery, you don't determine the price of crude oil, that is the input. Neither do you determine the price of the output, which is the refined product, because the price of crude oil is determined in the world market. And then the price of the refined product, which is like kerosene, diesel, and all that, is determined by the MPA here. So the only way you can remain profitable is if you are efficient. This refinery was established in 1960. It is old. It is old. If you put in 1 barrel, you won't get even 1 barrel out in terms of the monetary value. So clearly a decision must be taken on TOR. If we want to revamp it, let's revamp it. Let's look for the money. If we want a strategic investor, let's do that. But we can't keep pushing things around. I don't think that this IMC, in any case, will solve the problem. But the problem for TOR is not about people renting their tank farms, putting in finished products, and then coming to sell them. That is not the problem for TOR. The problem for TOR is refinery. It ought to refine crude oil in an efficient, cost-effective manner. Yeah. That is what we ought to be looking at.
Saying quickly on this, and I'm going to get Prof and
inaugurating the board is a great idea, but it's meaningless. We've inaugurated boards, and what have we had? We've had more losses. So that is not the matter. Kintampo has sat at the ministry before. He and me have shared the place on the advisory board. Even though he may not have been there, we've been together. He knows clearly that the strategic problem you have is not that it's not going to be solved by the appointment of a board. The IMC has been set up to actually make some necessary inquiries and hold the fort interim, which is a very good decision.
No, but look at the facts. Yeah. The IMC was appointed in June.
Yes.
The losses, the disappearance was recorded on the 4th of September, under their watch.
Yeah, no.
So how is that an effective mechanism to solve the problem? When they themselves have overseen the problem?
You see, you go and inherit a culture. You as management, you may not be able to eliminate everything at a given point in time, but you should be able to spot them and take immediate action and recover.
After the fact.
You are sitting here today. You have people who you give instructions to, and they breach them. But you should have management systems in place to be able to identify and take action. When people use your cars to do private work, you're able to identify them and set up committees to investigate them and take action. They've done the right thing. They've identified the thing. Tell me the last time you had anything being identified at all under any board. Tell me. This 4.8 million, didn't we have boards there? Tell me the last time you heard of it. When
you mean the one in 2012 and
2015? Tell me if you heard anything about it. Who uncovered it? The same.
That was the time that Kintampo was.
He was there. He was in the ministry. You have today a 5 million bill from Bust against TOR, product losses as well. About $5 million as well. I mean, who is identifying it? So you don't. The key thing here for me is that they are putting in systems to start identifying where the loopholes are. I don't think the IMC is going to have to stay there for long. That's a fact. But the most important thing for TOR going forward is not just the appointment of an MD and another board. It's just another continuation of the problem.
You say privatize it.
That is as simple as that. You have to take a strategic decision about it. Today, nobody should call TOR a strategic asset. It has been a strategic liability, an emotional liability. That's the fact. If you want to turn it into an asset for the state, government is better off taking revenue out of taxes from a functioning TOR under a private sector hand who has skin in the game. Everybody who goes around TOR hasn't got skin in the game. So if an MD goes to cut a deal, $1 on a barrel, and that dollar may just be the whole profit, you think it's just $1. He will be fine. I mean, Sylvester, you've been working around petroleum a bit. We know what happens at Tor. Tor is going down, but there are some individuals in Tor who are always going up, living very, very good lives. Not lives that look like people who have not been paid a salary in 3 months when you find the union screaming and shouting. Please, you want to deal with the matter. Let's not be discussing IMC or board. That's not the strategic matter. The strategic matter is the strategic problem that has bedeviled Tor all this while. It's a governance matter that feeds into the management matter. He's right when John is right when he says that the board is a limited liability, so there should be a certain mechanism for appointing the board. His government and all the governments before them have never acted like that. They've all been acting as if it's still the president running, managing a ministry through a minister. That's what happens. You have the presidency appointing MDs. That's what happens in this country now. Yeah, whether it's a limited liability bust or you go to Tor. So those are not my problems. The things that governments have shown since 1961 and 1963. 1961-63, in this place, Tor belonged to ENI, Egypt. ENI that we fight here today. That is so those private. I'm going to wrap up something here. Wrap up quickly. We moved in, and somewhere in 1977 is when government took over Tor. But prior to that, Tor never had problems. You see. When we so go back to privatization. Let me bring in Professor Dr. Tue Champon, and I'll bring in Dr. Aining shortly, Professor Aining shortly on this. Doc, what's your diagnosis of the Tor problem, and what solutions would you prescribe to it? Do you agree with the view that says simply privatize it, let government get off its hands of this, and let the private sector run it?
Yeah, I mean, good morning. I think Senor is absolutely right. You know, the problems of Tor are financial, they are governance related, and they are operational related. I had a chance to actually do my service at Tor back in 2000-2008. And some of the issues that you're hearing today in relation to product losses and things not being found, even back then, 13 years ago, still used to be the case. So it tells you that these issues are age-old. And like Senor is saying, some of the people there are getting rich at the expense of the collective interest of the nation. Interestingly, when you look at the 2019 State Ownership Report, which is under the hand of the Ministry of Finance, all of the key metrics of Tor from 2015 to 2019, negative net profit margin, negative earnings before interest, negative return on assets, return on equity, nothing to write home about. So basically, we have mismanaged over time what is supposed to be a strategic national asset. And it goes back to the politics, it goes back to having people there who are not meant to have, done or do the job. I remember when I was there, the total staff strength was probably around 600 and 650. And when we had conversations with people who knew their work, they told us that you didn't need more than 200 people to actually run that refinery. So it tells you that the problems are difficult and they are age-old in that sense of the word. So for me, resolving it comes back to what you want to do with the asset. Clearly, you need money, you need investment. I fully subscribe to the view of privatizing Tor and having the government also take some sort of equity or strategic stake in it. So it's not 100% privatization in that sense of the word, but you could still have 1 or 2 board positions and still have a special purpose vehicle owning some stake in the asset. But the running of the asset and the day-to-day operational decisions need to be fully run as a commercial entity would. None of the people in there would run Tor, and for that matter, many of the state companies that we have, if they had it as their own company. That is the fact. And we have just mismanaged, unfortunately, these assets years down the line. So I fully subscribe to what Senor has been saying, and to an extent also what John has also said. But I don't think it's just a management issue. The issues go far deeper than that. And this, what we've seen in terms of the losses, is just really a tip of the iceberg. There are bigger criminality and criminal-related issues that happen within the wider downstream or petroleum bulk management chain in Ghana.
I mean, that's a perfect point to bring in Professor Ening, because Prof, it's really shocking, and Dr. Teo Champon just touched on it. If it's been happening for decades, somebody should correct me, I'm yet to hear a story of a prosecution of any of these individuals involved in the siphoning, the disappearance of all these have been going on, the millions and millions and billions that get lost almost every year from Tor. We know on the back of this latest IMC report that some staff members have been interdicted, right? But if you look at the positions, they are all middle level, small level. There's some, not the big fishes involved. Well, what's your own reading on? How do you go to the bottom of this? The individuals, the networks that encourage such massive corruption at all? Hello, Prof. Prof. Ening, can you hear me? If you can please unmute for me. Okay. Okay, I think we lost him, but let me bring Sylvester. Sylvester, so this is happening, obviously, in the period where the ministry has said, we're going to put an IMC in, they'll bring a report, we send it to the president. President looks at their recommendations, and I've heard from the ministry that one of the things they're looking at is also, can we propose some strategic partnerships for Tor to work? What is the game plan here?
Well, thank you very much. And for the game plan, I have no idea what the president will subsequently be doing or what recommendations the minister responsible for energy will be recommending to the president. But I think that putting Tor in the hands of some strategic partners is long overdue. I mean, the issues of Tor from the days of former President Jerry John Rawlings, it's been on the table and we've had serious issues with it. And for me, we have unofficial sources within Tor. We have friends, relatives who works in Tor. And I think that for Tor not to be functioning at the level it has to, or it ought to be functioning today, is man-made. Naturally, it's man-made. Yeah, it's man-made, nothing else.
But let's push this a bit more. Man-made, but it's created by the politicians.
Well,
why should you have thousands of people working in a refinery that produces 45,000?
I wouldn't say it's politicians, but I would say it is the leadership or people who have been appointed. No, please. You see, if you are appointed as an MD of a state institution or a CEO or minister for whatever it is, you know the place better than anybody else. For me, you know the place better than any individual. The president may only act on information given him. He may not be aware of the day-to-day running of the institution. So for me, I think it's the chief executives that have been appointed, and rightly so the board members. Yeah, but you give board directions.
But there's impunity. Impunity only thrives when there's no responsibility. Nobody's sanctioned, nobody's punished.
Exactly.
The man is just sacked, and he walks away. Meanwhile, he leaves in his wake millions of losses.
Exactly.
Why doesn't the appointing of the political appointed authority sanction people, serve as a deterrent to others?
You know that the MD, the immediate past MD, and then the deputy, were sacked. And then an interim management committee was put in place to really investigate the circumstances under which these products got missing. So I think that's the right thing to do. Now, so you bring the report and the president will act on it. But beside the immediate discussion, things that we are discussing now, I mean, Tor has been bedeviled with a lot of challenges in times of old. And I think that if they should go even beyond these things that they've identified, more things will be discovered. And I think that where we are today, Tor, running Tor with 1,000 plus workers, obviously there are hands that will not have anything to do.
Job for the boys. Isn't that where we need to start?
Yes, I think we should have a national conversation.
It was like I'm about to speak Ghana. Slide knows the thing. You are talking about which MD? The MD is there, they'll call him from Flagstaff House or Jubilee House, depending on which government is there, then you know what name of the house is. You understand? Then Sly is here, he's MP Or, you know, when he was back then in the go, was running he's a King Kong in that point. He's a very powerful man. This man will call you. We have this person. Minister will call you. And let me tell you the biggest side of it, biggest part of the problem is the trading of the crude. Yeah. There's no commercial sense at all. Zero. They don't plan their commerce. None. They don't have one. You want a cargo. Some politician will call somebody and say, look, I have this guy who wants to bring crude. Then they practically force the crude on you. You do the deal. John, go on. Oh, sorry, John. Let John.
No,
I'll come to Christian. John, yes.
Some politician calls and says, do this, do this. When you do that, you put all of us in bad light. Exactly. If you know of a particular politician.
John, you can't stand on TV and say you don't know what I'm saying.
Please,
let me hear John. Let me hear John react to it. Yeah, John. But you can't deny that politician are part of the problem.
I believe with my brother, we are all trying to solve a problem. Yeah. In trying to solve a problem, please, let's not brush all of us with a dirty brush. Even there's a statement before you from Tor. Read it carefully. In April, drums of cables were missing. It was discovered by that management. When they were about to take action, the minister asked them to step aside and brought in a new manager, which is the IMC. They were supposed to curtail that. On 4th September, products got missing. Beyond 4th September, at the end of September, that is 25th September, 252,000 liters got missing. Senor, I'm virtually saying the same thing with you, that if a whole board, and when it comes to corporate governance, certain decisions can only be taken by the board, cannot fix this problem, which includes finding a strategic partner, because the essence of a board is to bring together a collection of people who have knowledge, who have intellect and understanding of the sector. It's because shareholders cannot manage the company, because they may not have the expertise. That is why they go for a board. The board is supposed to have that expertise, both technical and financial, and to advise the shareholder. And I'm saying that if the board cannot achieve that purpose, I don't believe that a 3-member IMC can achieve that purpose.
Yeah, I mean, let me ask you, John. Let me ask you, John, to the solution. Do you support the view that privatizes? Because that, I guess, is
I support it. Okay. During our time, we even went to get a strategic partner. But the truth is that, Senor, even before you get the private sector, you must clean the books. You must put the entity or the company in a certain position that will make it attractive. Yeah. That's why I'm saying that you need a board to clean all these issues, put it in a good shape, like we did with, I think, Airtel. If you recall, Airtel had to be put in a certain position before you then sell it. So we are saying the same thing. All I'm pleading with my friend is that in trying to solve this problem, it's true that there may be some undercurrent, but let's be careful not to brush everybody. Let me
quickly bring in Professor Ining on the Prof. They are individuals, and we've heard the suggestions, politicians, staff, but there are people responsible for the rot at Tor. Why are we not focusing there a bit? Because even if you privatize, you have to work with people.
Yes, but I think what we are looking at is a complex, sophisticated network of individuals, of groups, who over the years have intermixed their personal company interest to such a manner that right now it's almost impossible to disentangle them. So we need a really very down-to-earth, methodical approach to disentangling this corrupt network. And it's not something that we can just do by changing an IMC and bringing in a full board. I mean, it's from what Sayo was saying. Since government took over in 1977 thereabouts, Tor has had these recurrent problems. Then we need a more sophisticated approach and understanding of the complexities that are underlying the network corruption that we are seeing. And this is not just about Tor. It's the people at Tor, there'll be people at the banks who ensure that the monies are transferred. You know, there are people in the Ghana Police Service who provide, you know, protection for the movement of the oil, in ensuring that the tankers are not stopped. So what we are looking at is complexity that we need to understand, and how that complexity manifests in the thefts that we have. But that complexity and the underpinning structures are things that we experience on a daily basis. I mean, let me share an example with you this morning, where 2 police vehicles, numbers GP 3894 and 3877, consistently over the George Bush Highway changed drivers and sought to intimidate people and extort money. They attempted to extort 1,000 cedis from me at 0446 this morning. Okay, so Tor is only a tip of the iceberg, as some of the colleagues on the program have been saying. This is a problem that goes much bigger than Tor. And I'm hoping that we have the sophisticated approaches, the understandings of complexity theory, to be able to begin the process of dismantling, what is really a threat to both our security in all its manifestations, particularly to the economy.
I mean, Dr. Kintampo, Tor is not attractive, and it won't be attractive to, I mean, I can dare say any private investor.
Not necessarily.
I mean, I'm coming. Let me disentangle it. Because, as John Kintampo has said, because of the debt that it's carrying. So how do you restructure Tor as it currently stands to make it, because you support the privatization angle, how do you restructure Tor as it stands now to make it attractive to anybody who wants to come and invest in and put their money in it?
There are various approaches to it. One of which is you can actually ring fence the debt, right? And deal with that as a separate entity away from the going concern operations of the business. That's a decision that government has to take. But ultimately, you're right. As it stands now, if you were to package it as an investment proposition, you wouldn't maybe find too many of buyers wanting to get into without having to fundamentally restructure and deal with the debt issues, as well as the corporate governance and the related operational issues. I mean, I do recall, 2008, when I was there, one night we were on a shift where you just get a call that like a particular tanker full of crude oil is sitting somewhere on the seas, and they want to pump this particular crude, into the tanks at top. But the point being that there was all sort of shady mechanisms and deals, right, underpinning it. I cannot go into the substantive details, but what Prof was saying earlier is that there is a very complex network and web that underpins the things that we see happening at top. Someone I know who works there actually said, look, that whole refinery should even be treated as a crime scene, because there are things that happen there that if you were to get national security or these guys going in there, you'll be shocked at the level of theft and pilfering that takes place in there. So going forward, dealing with the debt issues becomes paramount. I think that can be ring-fenced. I think that can be treated as a separate entity and then repackage the operations of the business for that strategic investor to come in and want to support it. I don't believe that the way we have run the refinery as currently pertains is the best. Literally, we have turned Tor into a tank farm. It is meant to be refining crude and supporting the strategic well-being of the nation. But what we see is completely the other way around.
I mean, Sylvester, is there political will to do what Professor Dr. Kintampo is saying?
Well, I think for the good of our society and the generality of Ghanaians, we should. And I believe that the president has the goodwill and then the political will to do the needful. I also have no doubt and the confidence in the energy minister that he will do what is right. I mean, he started. This issue of IMC is to unravel the situation on hand, and he will take a decision. So for me, I will plead that Ghanaians should become, as the IMC had assured the management and then the team over there. Look, no investor will pick Tor at its current stage. No investor, until we take away the debt. Because the investor also need to bring money to change the equipment and put in proper structures to be able to work as it ought to work. And the point I wrote down I was going to make was about the point that the professor just made about Tor being turned into a tank farm. I can't believe it.
Which is the kind
now it's more attractive for people to come and use your facility, and you make some commissions from there. Where your core mandate, it's because of the debt levels of Tor. That is why now banks are not even supporting them to perform their core mandate. Because if Tor is giving money today to bring in crude oil and it's finished, people are on them. Their debtors, you see, all these cases are in court. Yeah. And I believe that the figures we are looking at now may not be the ultimate price we'll be paying when we finally get settled.
I'll come to you to wrap up, but finally.
Yeah, finally, what I'm saying is that, yes, there's a situation. I believe that the president has the goodwill of the good people of this country, and he has a mandate to do that. So I'm hopeful the president will do that.
I mean, John, let me go to John. You want Parliament to take over the probe. I mean, what difference would that make?
Probe. Parliament is already written to Tor. I've confirmed with the clerk of the committee that under the instruction of the chairman, we are asking for further and better particulars because we have an oversight responsibility. And as representatives of the people, I think that it's important that we get all the facts right. Two is that I'm happy that Sylvester says that he doesn't think that Tor should be turned into a tank farm. As we speak, that is the position of government. Since government told us that they want to turn Tor into a tank farm, I haven't heard of any contrary view from government. So first of all, we must even know, what does government think of Tor? Because government is the owner. What does the owner think of that entity? What does the owner want to do with Tor? Okay. Is this still on the part of making Tor into a tank farm, or it believes in revamping Tor? Because you must process a certain minimum amount of crude per day. If you don't do that, you won't break even. And in this day, I think the threshold for a country like Ghana should be minimum about 70 to 100,000 barrels per day. If you can't achieve that, forget it. Then the complexity of the refinery itself. So I think the government itself ought to tell us what it believes in, so that we are clear in respect of where we are going. Then we can proffer suggestions on how we get to that destination. Okay. I think it's very, very important.
Thank you, Senor.
Yeah, Evans. Tor was refining till recently, offering tooling services to Woodfields. All right? Woodfields were not running losses out of that operation. Tor was making an income. So it is possible, even with the resources you have today, for Tor to somewhat survive. But it just can't manage the commerce. It's a complex structure that Tor hasn't got the capacity for. I told you this earlier in the week, and rightly, this is also being affirmed by what you were saying. We need to just ring fence the debt.
So government will take care of the debt?
Government has to ring fence. It's already been doing it in different forms, because at the end of the day, government still has to pay for it.
They've been doing it, but piling on more.
Piling up,
so
yes. So let's take all that debt out and have it off. Yeah. So you actually have a debt.
You are still piling.
No, oh no, you had it off. You have it off
30 seconds.
Yeah, you have it off Tor, and now you actually have a clean Tor. Yeah. You value the fiscal assets there, and that will be government's contribution into the new Tor. And let the private sector come into the game. Preferably, people with trading skills as well. Because they are the same people who create competition for you in your market. So when you put their skin also in the game, they have an interest to make it work. BDCs have been a part of that story. The international oil trading companies have been part of that story. So it is possible for that conversation to happen. And if you are looking at strategic partners, one unfortunate thing is that every day we take strategic partners, we have to look white. In this country,
yeah, Ghanaians can do it.
That thinking must change. Sit down with industry and let's all figure out how we can make this work. We are all beneficiaries of Tor.
Okay, thank you, Doc. Final word to you on this. Well, the people have been interdicted. Is that enough? What more should we do?
Yeah, I think we just need to wait.
Sorry, I mean, questioning. I want a questioning to take that final. Ms. Aining?
The people are stolen.
Well, I think for me, my proposal is also that we need very diverse methods for the strategic dismantling of the corruption and the crime networks that make us understand their structure, their interlinkages, so that we can begin the process of rebuilding the strategic assets that will be able to provide service. consequences.
Yeah, I mean, and Dr. Champon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we need to let the investigations run the full course. But beyond that, the core or the bigger issues need to be addressed, one of which is what to do with this asset and how it sits within the bigger architecture of the country's plan to become a petroleum hub in the West African sub-region.
Yeah, I mean, that's another one there. I mean, thank you, Senor.
It's good to actually note that Jinapor moved from the board matter to now talk about what the shareholder really thinks.
Yeah.
That is where the problem
Senor,
is.
thank you very much, Sylvester. John, Tue Champon, Professor Aiden, grateful. As you always know, Newsfile is all about the Bank of Africa, MTN, Ashasa University, Robert and Sons, Waylead, Star Assurance, MG Auto Trading, CBG, Fabric Metal, Rehabilitation Properties. Grateful to them. And I must indicate that producer of the show, the director of the show, by the way, it's David Odro, and today's his birthday. I wish you a very, very happy birthday indeed. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.